conversations with Trump on that front, at least at this part for 2018? What can you tell us?
Not much.
Not much.
Not much. Yeah.
But
everybody's talking about it.
Yeah, everyone's talking about it. I had to ask this as the first question, but you have said before, if you were to be chair of the Federal Reserve, that you would actually be pursuing tighter monetary policy. And you have said before, monetary policy, there's only so much you can do to help parts of the economy, and it's time for fiscal policy. But what can you actually see out of a Trump administration amidst this kind of political gridlock we see in Washington?
Well, there's a lot of reform possibilities. The tax reform is on the agenda. Regulatory reform I emphasize quite a bit. I think there's some financial market reform. There's maybe monetary reform and budgets being out there. So there's a lot going on, and the question is how they get it going. And there's a lot of agreement on issues between the Congress and the administration on issues of tax reform, what the marginal tax rate should be. So I think it's a good possibility to get some things done.
How high of a hurdle is it now for these tax reforms? Now that we do see a bit of this, quite a clear rejection of what we saw with the health care bill last week.
Well, tax reform is always difficult, and there's different interests that have to be considered. It's complicated, but I think there's more agreement or congruence between the Congress and the administration than there has been for a long time. So I think we'll be able to get it done. There are differences that people focus on, but that's a difference, which I think is a promising one.
Do you think? What do you think of the Trump administration's economic policies so far? Is the America First approach? Do you think
just
that's
beginning, of course, just beginning? I focused a lot on the regulation issues because he has used some executive orders that have rolled back some regulations I don't think were necessary. The cost is very high compared to the benefits. Some things related to the actions they can take on the Congressional Review Act. The trade issues you ask are really front and center on many things, and some discussion of how to renegotiate or redo NAFTA is very much in question now, how that's going to occur. So we don't know, but I think the emphasis here is to try to make the trade agreements better.
And the big question we still don't really quite know, John, is the fact that, what President Trump wants out of the Fed. Does he want higher rates? He has kind of been on both sides of the issue before, but does he actually want the Fed to be leaning against some of these pro-growth policies?
When you say tight, I think the way I think about it is you want a more strategic Fed, a more rules-based Fed. It's not necessarily tighter, it's just a Fed where they're describing what their policy is so it's clear to people. The Congress is interested in that. They have some legislation that goes in that direction. I think recently Janet Yellen and Stanley Fischer, the vice chair, have talked more about that. So there's a sense now that they get back to normal. It's called normalization. And then policy can operate in good ways as it has in the past, in the 80s and 90s, for example.